Hey guys, welcome back. Hero Beat, as well as Diva Hero, has completely fallen off the map. Do you know why this is? I believe people have taken the wrong approach to the Hero Beat deck, looking at it solely as a beatdown deck, when it should be seen as a control deck that can generate advantage over a few turns with looping Ocean, getting back your advantage with Stratos, summoning it each turn and getting more monsters if they're not able to push through what you have, which is what you want to do. You want to set a bunch of trap cards and slowly whittle them down, similar to how the Frog deck wins, or Blackwing wins, or Vayu wins over a few turns by incrementally gaining advantage with your engine. The traditional Diva Hero Beat deck completely focuses on the wrong thing. It forgoes the element of the grind game with the hero cards. Instead, it focuses on pairing Divas with your Stratos and a Miracle for the big push. But the issue is you can't really search those cards. You gotta draw the Diva, you gotta draw Miracle, and you gotta draw your hero cards, as well as not getting interrupted by their traps. While being a trap deck, you should play the deck as a trap deck and not as a combo deck with trap cards. If you want to play the combo-centric version of heroes, you should play Diva Hero and not the Beat version. Because the advantage of Hero Beat is that you're immune to cards like Royal Oppression and Deck Devastation Virus, but playing cards like Diva in your deck randomly makes you lose to those cards in game 1. The issue with that version of Diva Hero Beat is that it still loses to cards like Sirocco, Armed Wing, or really any monster bigger than 1900, considering Alias cannot attack over it, and you need to pair with cards like Honest or Diva to make a synchron attack over it, but that doesn't really solve the issue. Those cards are not searchable for your engine, so when you just see Stratos and some trap cards, you still struggle against their large attack monsters. So how do we solve this? Well, by incorporating cards like Elemental Hero Prisma, as well as some other Elemental Hero monsters for this strategy, we can overcome the issue by building a game plan similar to what was played in Big City back in the day. So, instead of seeing it as a hero beatdown deck, it's a hero control deck. Let's jump right into it. To start things off, I'm playing one copy of Elemental Hero Stratos, the quintessential part of this deck. The effect to destroy back row comes up quite frequently, especially against Blackwing, so you can out their Black Whirlwind with just your engine cards. Because you can recycle him back with Ocean, so if Ocean survives a turn, you can in the standby phase grab back the Stratos, summon it and pop a back row. The reason why I'm playing two copies of Elemental Hero Ocean is because I'm not playing any other water monsters such as Deep Sea Diva or Spined Gilman. And you need some amount of water monsters in your deck so you can actually summon Absolute Zero, which is the main boss monster of the deck. This is never an issue because I play Elemental Hero Prisma. So Prisma can reveal Terra Firma to send Ocean from the deck to the graveyard, so you can make Miracle Fusion immediately live if you need to. Ocean can also get back monsters from the field, so you can bounce himself back if you want to summon another monster to not lose to Torrential Tribute. You can also summon it alongside Stratos to get it back in the standby phase, so they don't need to kill the Stratos. You can keep the Stratos on the board. You don't need to attack into a prison even with the Stratos. You can just get it back every single turn, and if they can't break through your trap cards, let's say you have your own battle traps, that's how you can protect the Ocean and get back a hero every single standby phase. Since this is still a hero control deck, we need to play 3 copies of Elemental Hero Neo's Alias. Gemini Spark is still one of the best cards in the deck, being able to chain it to something that threatens to remove the Alias at a +1, popping their other cards, or just having spell cards in your deck so you don't lose the Royal Decree that can still remove their threats. Alias being 1900 also lets you attack over things like Bora, Shura, Dark Refer, or any smaller monster that's being played in a metagame. It's a bit of a shame it's only 19, so you can attack over frogs in defense. But we have some hate in our side deck for the frog decks, so that matchup is not too worrisome. As I alluded to earlier, I'm playing one copy of Elemental Hero Prisma. Seeing as you can reveal Terra Firma to send Ocean, or you can reveal Chimeritic Fortress Dragon to send Cyber Dragon, this gives Prisma a lot of options. So either Prisma can immediately fuel up your graveyard to make Miracle Fusion live and summon Absolute Zero, so it gives the deck a lot more speed than it used to have before. You used to have to summon a hero, let it die, summon another hero, and then you can Miracle Fusion. Well, now you can just e-call into Prisma, reveal Terra Firma, Foolish Ocean, play Miracle, summon Ab-Zero, Ab-Zero just attack over their field when they wouldn't expect you to summon it so fast. Since the Hero Beat engine doesn't naturally out a Cataster, Being able to summon the Prisma, send a Cyber Dragon, and contact fuse it away into a Chimeric Fortress Dragon is a clean out to a catastrophe that's already established on the field. Also, with a lot of people believing in the Valley Fury in their decks. Maybe they play it in Dragons, they play it in Quick Draw, they play it in Amaryllis. Whichever deck that utilizes Cyber Valley the best, you can have a easy out to Cyber Valley at a +1 and still get a 2000 attack beatstick. A lot of these Valley decks rely on Valley being banished, which it naturally gets when you attack into it. And then they can recur it back with DDR, Return, Dealk, any way to bring it back from the banish zone. Well, if it's in the graveyard because you contact fused it away, you're completely playing around that, while also getting +1 and putting an Elemental Hero Monster in your graveyard for Ocean or for Miracle Fusion. For the last Elemental Hero Monster of the deck, I'm playing one copy of Captain Gold. So Captain Gold, being able to search a Skyscraper, lets your Stratos or any other E-Hero monster naturally attack over large attack monsters such as Stardust Dragon, Armed Wing, Sirocco. Really anything that's bigger than 1900 is quite troublesome to attack over. If you're able to discard this, search Skyscraper, recur it back with Ocean, you can also out monsters with 3000 attack points, such as Ancient Gear Giltron Dragon in the Ancient Gear deck. This being able to become a 3100 attack beatstick lets you kill pretty much any monster in the format. It is also very nice with Ocean turn 1, if you can just pitch this, search a Skyscraper. If they don't deal with the Ocean, you get back a 2100 attack beatstick next turn. This is also a light monster, so it works naturally very well with the two Honest that we play. Honest is also a nice card when you don't open any monsters. You can normal summon it, attack for 11, because maybe they don't want to commit into your back row. And then you force them to summon a monster, and then you can beat them down with your hero monsters. And for the last monster, I'm maining one Cyber Dragon. There's people playing Machina, there's people playing Valley in their deck if they believe in the Valley Fury. There's people who play Cataster because Cataster is naturally a card that's very good against the hero beat deck, considering Alias, even with an Honest, cannot attack over it. So people just summon Cataster and pass on it. They don't need to attack into your prison, and they don't feel threatened by you, because if you have to waste a miracle to just out a Cataster, that's not a very good trade for you. But having Cyber Dragon, either you can draw this, or you can draw the Prisma or search it and just contact fuse this away, gives you a very nice out in game 1 to any of these machine cards. Since you have a lot of tutors for Prisma, you can get to it every time. So I'm not playing cards like Deep Sea Diva or Spine Gilman in this deck, nor am I playing cards like Crystal Seer or Snowman Eater or whichever other water monster people utilize in their deck to summon Ab-Zero. I believe it's a much better approach to have cards like Prisma and multiple copies of Ocean, so you can more reliably get to the water monsters with just the hero beat engine by itself. So drawing Miracle Fusion is rarely bad. Whilst with the hero beat Diva deck, a lot of the time that you draw Miracle Fusion, it ends up being bad early game, and you're kind of forced to commit these kind of cards to the field when maybe you don't really want to summon a Diva and go for those explosive synchro plays into the potential back row. The issue also is playing these cards is Spine Gilman is a brick, so if you play one Gilman and you get it out of your deck with Diva, the other two Divas aren't very good in your deck. Like, sure, you can synchro away into a 6 and climb up to an 8, but that forces your opponent not to have a single response. And if you play 2 copies of Gilman to allow Diva to always be a level 5 synchro monster, then you run into the issue of drawing Gilmans all day, and you're not trying to sit on 1700 vanilla monsters. The way this deck loses is just drawing too many of these cards that don't have any synergy with your deck. The Elemental Hero monsters at least have synergy with Stratos, being able to search them whenever you want to. You can also use them in the graveyard for Miracle Fusion. With Miracle Fusion, I look at it very much similar to how I look at Dark Arm Dragon in a Dark deck, for example. If you draw Dark Arm Dragon, you're just gonna play to summon it. You're gonna maybe commit a little bit more aggressively into your back row because you can fall back on the Dark Arm Dragon. Similarly with Miracle Fusion, if you draw Miracle Fusion in your opening hand, you just make sure that Stratos either searches you, Prisma, or Ocean, so you have the water monster to make it live. You have enough tutors in your deck to where in 1 or 2 turns you're probably going to see an Alias anyway, or you're going to see trap cards so where if you search Ocean, you can get back to Stratos and that can get you the Alias to pair with your Gemini Spark, for example. For the spell cards, I'm of course playing 3 copies of Miracle Fusion. I see some people playing 2 of this card. I believe that's absolutely fake. You want to see this card. You rather see 2 than 0. As I mentioned earlier, if you draw Miracle Fusion, you can just make sure your Stratos will get you to a water monster eventually, so it won't be dead for too long. So Miracle Fusion is definitely a must-add free in this deck. You need some amount of bombs in your deck to actually make your deck worthwhile and have something in the late game that you can draw into that swings the game heavily in your favor. Play 3 copies of Gemini Spark. This card is absolutely insane. Just chaining it to their removal on your alias that they eventually have to use, because you're just going to trap their monsters, and alias beating them down every single turn is not something they can let go unstopped. And if they ever do anything to your alias, you just chain the spark, pop another card, draw a card. Gemini Spark gets a little bit worse with people playing cards like Legacy of Yaragarasu, being a good chainable to spark hitting it. But still, if you chain Spark to their Bottomless or Deep Prison, popping a Legacy is not the end of the world. And most of the time you can usually use this on a monster or a backer that you believe is not a draw trap and still get the +1 off of it. For the tutors, I'm playing 3 copies of Ecol and 1 copy of Rhoda. So a lot of people who play the Diva version of this deck, they exclude some of these cards in the deck. Maybe they just play 1 or 2 Ecols because they don't want to clog on normal summons. Because you can't really play all 4 of these if you don't play all of these E-heroes. If you play the typical deck and you only play these 5, having 4 tutors for these 5, with this one already taking up another one of these from your deck, you're gonna draw into these dead late game. So by upping the E-hero count and cutting the bad cards like Diva and Gilliman out of your deck, you can play max copies of the Stratos Searchers. It just doesn't really make sense to slim down on any of these cards. You need your core engine of Stratos, and the way to play Stratos in this deck is to play maximum copies of it so you can see it turn 1. And you have to make some concessions by that by playing more E-heroes in your deck. But none of these cards are bad. This card gets you Skyscraper, which allows you to attack over large attack monsters. Prisma allows you to make Miracle Fusion live turn 1 if you need to, so your deck now gets some speed. Or you can search cards like Cyber Dragon from your deck by copying the name and contact fusing away cards like Cataster or cards like Cyber Valley, which we just talked about. It really leans into this aspect of the toolboxness of the Hero Beat deck. You can search a beat stick, you can search recursion, you can search removal, or ways to make your other cards better. You can search a way to attack over the large attack monsters. So if you struggle with attacking over a Sirocco, for example, and they refuse to attack into your prison because they know it's there and they understand that, okay, if I just sit on this large attack monster, my opponent cannot pressure me. Well, now you can. You can just attack over their monster. And my side deck is even more tailored to beat those decks. I have cards in my side deck against the trap decks, so I can make sure that my Skyscraper push goes through with the monster. I have cards against frogs to where my hero cards get a lot stronger. But we'll talk about that later. Of course, I'm playing Skyscraper to search off of Captain Gold. This card allows you to attack over any monster when you attack. So if they attack into you, it does not gain an attack boost. However, if they attack into you, you have a large suite of trap cards that can just remove their monster. So the issue is you not being able to attack over their monster, which Skyscraper allows you to do. For the draw cards, I was contemplating on this quite a lot, but eventually I settled on 3 copies of Upstart Goblin and 3 copies of Legacy of Yaragarasu. I'm pretty aggressive with this card. I play it a lot quicker than maybe some other people do, because I believe the value in Legacy is setting it alongside a trap card turn 1, usually betting at a heavy. And if they don't have heavy, I'm fine playing it and just seeing the next card in my deck, knowing that they likely do not have heavy in their hand. Some people play around this by not activating heavy when you have 2 back rows. Let's say you have 2 back rows turn 1, they expect it's a draw trap and a real trap, they won't heavy because it's just a 1-for-1. So what I do post side is usually I take these out and put in real traps, and then I can set 2, and since they saw the draw traps in game 1, they won't heavy my 2 back rows, and I can use one of them to disrupt their place and then keep the other one set, and they expect that's either a draw trap or something else. They're still in the same predicament of, well, they don't really want a heavy there because they expect it's a draw trap. And if we pass back a few turns and they understand, oh, maybe it's a real trap, and eventually they heavy, well, if we get to turn 5 or 6, then that's exactly what I want to do with my deck. And the mind game of Legacy of Yaragarasu cannot be understated. So I'm playing the Upstarts because this is not a damage-based deck like Black Wings. I win based off advantage most of the time. Sure, you win when their life points hit 0, but there comes a point in the game where your opponent can no longer come back in a reasonable circumstance unless they sack you, draw into the specific card in their deck which they need to crack through your board and OTK you on that turn. Usually when you get to the later turns of the game, you've accumulated so much advantage, so even if they do heavy your back row, you have enough back rows in your hand so you can set them all the next turn, and they can't break through your Absolute Zero or your other monsters with maybe Honest in hand. So giving them potentially one more turn with the upstart is completely fine, and the deck space is not an issue at all. This deck is very slim. You could easily play 35 cards if you could. For the other trap cards, I'm playing 3 copies of Dimensional Prison, 2 copies of Bottomless, 1 copy of Starlight Road. So a lot of people play more of this. I don't agree with that. I think 1 is completely fine. It's one of those cards that either when you see this or you see Solemn Judgment, you're just insulated against their heavy TT, Mirror Force, whatever they have that can blow you out when you do your push or against your trap cards. So Solemn is a card that I'm not playing in decks like Blackwing or Vayu because I don't believe you need to, because those decks have ways to deal with established boards through their engine. Hero Beat struggles quite a lot at dealing with established field, so you really need to hold your opponent down, and the way you do that is by using your trap cards. So you need to play cards that ensure your trap cards can stick around on the field. That's why I believe Solemn is a good card in a deck like Hero Beat, while it's not a good card in a deck like Black Wings or Vayu Turbo. To touch a little bit more on the road, I believe a lot of the games that you lose with the hero deck is that you get to the later turns and you eventually grind them out a little bit. Perhaps they don't overcommit, so you can take advantage of popping all of their cards with Gemini Spark or clearing all of their resources with your pushes. And they rely on using Heavy Storm to clear your back row and kill you in 1 push. If that happens on turn 4, 5, 6, let's say, the chance that you see either Road or Solemn at that point, or that you summon an Absolute Zero and they can't kill you through the Absolute Zero because it blows up their entire field, is very high. So you don't have to see any of these cards turn 1. You can reasonably set 1 or 2 back rows turn 1 and play the long game and hold some of your cards in your hand. And then when they eventually are able to make said push, you can then set all of your back row. And then if they have the heavy and you don't see this, the chance of that is quite slim. I'm just playing 1 copy of Hero Blast. I noticed with the lack of duality in Edison Format, as opposed to later formats like Tengu or 2012, where you had duality in your hero deck, Hero Blast gets a whole lot worse. Hero Blast is really only good when you have both Alias and Gemini Spark at your disposal. Being able to summon Alias, set both of these behind it, Gemini Spark one of their cards, and then you can use the Hero Blast to get the Alias back and pop their monster, is a way to play around Heavy Storm, because then you can remove their monster and their other monster while still drawing a card and getting the Alias back. So having these chainables against something like Heavy actually comes up quite often, or just being able to remove their monsters without them playing into it. Usually if you have cards like Dimensional Prison, they're not gonna attack into them, but these are very proactive cards. But the issue is when you don't see decent combination, Hero Blast gets a whole lot worse, because this is on the field, and if they trap this with something like Bottomless or Prison, and you can't chain the Gemini Spark, the Hero Blast is just dead. But still, you want to have this card in your deck so you can see it eventually at some point in the game, just get back the Alias. Having too many of these cards and Miracle Fusion, which forces you to have pairs of cards, is often how you lose. 1 Karma Cut. So when you play so many heroes and you play cards like Ocean, which gets you back a hero, having 1 or 2 discard cards in your deck is not completely unreasonable. It's quite easy to find a card in your hand which you can pitch for Karma Cut. And I just wanted some concession in my deck against cards like Stardust Dragon, or cards against the Frog deck where you can deal with established dupe or sub-locks, as well as being able to banish both Treeborns at the same time. It's just a very versatile card. I believe this is better than Wing Blast because you want to remove the monster. Particularly against Frogs, this card is way better than Regeki Break. And against Black Wings, Regeki Break is a bit better because you can hit Whirlwind, but Karma Cutting their monster is better than using Regeki Break on it. And with Gemini Spark, I already have enough back row removal in my deck. I didn't feel the need to play Regeki Break, so I felt Karma Cut was the best option. And TT and Mirror Force, These cards are naturally very good in trap decks because when your opponent overcommits and tries to overwhelm you, having these cards to blow them out is nice. And I'm playing one copy of Trap Dust Shoot. So this is quite a slow deck, which makes Dust Shoot a whole lot worse than something like Blackwing Vayu or Frogs. Because a lot of the time, if you don't see it turn 1, it's going to be dead later game. Because you just grind them down to so few cards. And having the advantage of seeing their hand is not as important when you play such a slow deck. By the time you can actually capitalize off of your engine, they usually have seen 2 or 3 cards, so you can't really know that they won't have an answer. As I'm not playing any tuners in my deck, nor any way to take a tuner, making synchros in my deck is quite difficult. However, I'm still playing the Stardust Dragon for Starlight Road. You could probably cut both of these, the Black Rose and Ancient Fairy Dragon, to play more copies of Elemental Hero Gaia, seeing as you could realistically summon 3 Gaia in one game. For the cards that actually matter, the Fusion Monsters, 1 Gaia, 1 Grand Neos, 1 Super Alloy Beast Raptinus. It's just a generic Super Poly target. Being able to make this with 2 Alias and push for the additional 2200 in the battle phase could come up. Or perhaps if you play against a Gemini deck, you can side in the Super Polys. 1 D3 S-Frog. We'll talk about this when we get to the side deck. 2 Chimeratech Fortress Dragon. I'm siding the second Sidra, so it's reasonable that I could summon 2 of this in one game. 3 copies of Elemental Hero Absolute Zero. 1 Terra Firma. 1 copy of Wild Wingman, so you can send Elemental Hero Wildheart from your deck to the graveyard. And for the last Fusion Monster, I'm playing 1 copy of Elemental Hero Divine in Neos. For the side deck, I have 2 copies of DD Crow. Having a hand trap in a trap deck is very good, because if they use their back row removal like Heavy Storm, or perhaps they have a read on your back row, they can't really read a Crow in your hand unless you're obvious with it. Being able to have hand traps also insulates you against Heavy Storm somewhat, because you can Crow them under push, so they can't kill you, and then you can set your whole hand the next turn, because you don't fear Heavy Storm anymore. You could play a 3rd copy of Crow if your meta has a lot of graveyard-centric decks. 2 copies of Fossil Dyna Patches of Follow. So you want a really strong monster that you can summon alongside your hero monsters. Either strong in attack points to attack over their monsters, or strong in the effect of the Floodgate effect. With Skyscraper, I don't really struggle with attacking over cards like Titanial, cards like Red MD, cards like Blackwing Monsters. So having a Patchy that I can summon alongside my hero, and the hero can then attack over their, say, Titanial or Akaius against the Frog deck, and this card allowing them not to summon Fader, Gorse, Trag, bringing back Treeborn, and just having a monster they have to attack into that I can then trap, and then this card continues to flood them down. This is also an Earth monster, so your Miracle Fusion gets live a little bit earlier with having this card in your deck. You don't need to go over the Prisma route. Then I'm siding 1 copy of Elemental Hero Wildheart. So Wildheart is immune to trap cards. So when I summon this with a Skyscraper, I can freely attack into their large attack monsters against, for example, Blackwing or Vayu Turbo, without the fear of Bottomless, Deep Prison, Mirror Force, Torrential, any way to remove this off the field. It's also an Earth monster, so you have the ability to send this off of Prisma and make a Gaia if you need to. I'm siding the 2nd copy of Cyber Dragon. So against the machine decks, where you actually want to draw this card to make Chimeratech, and you want to make sure Prisma always has a Sider in the deck to send, so you can always make the Chimeratech. Then I'm siding 1 copy of Mystical Space Typhoon, mainly to deal with Black Whirlwind, but also to remove Royal Decree against the decks that side them in. So for example, Amaryllis or Blackwing with the Whirlwind, just being able to hit their key spell cards, or decks like Light Swan, for example. Then I'm siding 2 copies of Super Poly. So against Frogs, particularly Hero Frogs, you can very easily fuse into Ab-Zero with Super Poly. Even against Dream Frogs, if they have the sub-lock up, you can go activate Super Poly, fuse away the Dupe Frog and your hero monster into Absolute Zero. Dupe misses timing because the last thing that happens is Ab-Zero being summoned, and then you just attack over the Substitute. Or best case scenario, they resolve their entire sub combo, and they end on something like this. So they can attack into your Alias without the fear of being honested over. And they have dupe lock, so you can attack anything. This setup is very difficult to break through, but if you Super Poly, you can turn the dupe frogs, as well as the Death Frog, because they're all named Death Frog on the field, into a D3 S-Frog and just attack over the Substitute. Most good players will not make this field against you because they will expect you to side in Super Poly because you're playing heroes. But if they do make this field, you can very easily just do that play. If they instead just have one Dupe Frog on the field, you can, as we mentioned earlier, you can go activate, Super Poly, fuse away the Dupe Frog, make Absolute Zero and attack over the Substitute. So they can't really do their entire Frog combo against you because they just play into Super Poly. So they need to be cautious of how many Des Frogs with Dupe Frog they summon. Or if they do free Dupe Frog, you can also get Super Poly away all of those free. A good player will probably just do something like this. Or perhaps this, and just never summon the Des Frog, and just use their Monarchs to attack over your field instead. This is a bit harder to deal with, but you can still do things like Gemini Spark away one of this as Chainlink 2 or higher, so it misses timing, and then Chain the Hero Blast, considering you have Alias in the graveyard now, because of the cost, and remove this, and attack over this with Absolute Zero or something else. I'm citing 2 copies of Shadow Mirror, so this is against Vayu Turbo mainly, because you want to shut off the Vayu effect in the graveyard, as well as their bombs like Chaos Sorcerer or Dark Arm Dragon. It also is good chainable to something like Caius, Greffer, or Geddon, or even Plague Spreader in the graveyard to just deny them those plays. You don't play any Dark, so this does not affect you at all. 2 copies of Royal Oppression against the Special Summon heavy decks, and then 2 copies of Pulling the Rug against Diva Hero Beat, Hero Frogs, or Monarch heavy frog decks.